response in terms of people wanting to sign up and people wanting to watch back on the recording. So I don't want to waste any further time because we've got so many incredible guest speakers to hear from, and we want to allow time to answer your questions. There's some people have sent in their questions, and there'll be plenty of time for those on the call to ask away. So without any further ado, Hazel, can I hand over to you to kick us off with your experience working in recruitment?
Hi, thanks, Tania. Thanks so much to you, to Karen and Women in Architecture for this as well. I'm excited. So hi, everyone. I'm Hazel. I'm the founder of Curio, a specialist recruitment and headhunting agency based in London. Our client base spans the UK, Europe and Dubai, and we work across a range of sectors, including architecture, interior design, developers, owner-occupiers, family office and in-house teams. We work both across traditional architecture roles and non-traditional, including project design management, and have a strong track record of successfully working in senior and strategic positions. At Curio, we focus on very specific roles, and our clients are our partners who we know inside and out, and that makes us true matchmakers, ensuring that each placement aligns not only with the client's business goals, but also with the candidate's career journey. Curio was created to move away from bum on seats approach, and we believe in tailored, thoughtful recruitment built around an individual and not just numbers. And with over 10 years experience, Curio has built a strong track record, especially in promoting women in leadership positions. So what makes us different is we're consultative, we're not transactional. We take time to draw out what's truly important to you throughout the hiring process. We know the recruitment journey can be tricky, so focusing on pinpointing your strengths, your passions and unique contributions, because no two architects and designers are the same. So we've been asked to look at market trends. So just generally at the moment, having worked in recruitment for over a decade, I can say that the last 5 years have been some of the most challenging and unpredictable that I have ever seen. Global events, economically, socially, and politically, have created significant shifts in the architecture and design industries.
I'll put it on the TV.
Many Part 2s and architects have never experienced the days of prosperity, the opportunity-filled years when projects were flying here, there, and everywhere. Projects were moving quickly, studios were thriving, and the buzz of project wins filled offices. And I can empathise with the lack of current or the lack of positivity in the market at the moment, especially for those starting out in architecture, watching friends face redundancy and unsure of what the future holds. I think these times can make it really hard to keep our heads held high. I also see a lot of negativity surrounding the industry at the moment. And while I fully believe it's important to raise these concerns and highlight areas for improvement, I think it's equally crucial to be a part of the change rather than to get lost in the noise. So trends that I'm seeing around candidates at the moment and their behaviour. So for us, we're seeing a lot of a loss of passion, a disillusionment in the industry, and a lot of frustration. And I think that's based on my last thoughts. So in times like this, my advice is to step back and really reflect on what's important to you. What environments help you thrive? Is it big projects? Is it small projects? Are you happier in smaller offices or larger offices? Do you enjoy being thrown in the deep end, or do you learn slowly and like being around big teams with lots of support? Do you prefer leading teams, being hands-on? Do you design? Do you like managing delivery or people, or even focus on technical detailing? I think one of the questions we ask a lot is, when are you most happiest at work, and what are you doing in those moments, and what makes you feel most fulfilled? By clarifying those priorities, your career progression and your strengths, and where you are happy, you can approach and identify opportunities strategically and confidently, and in a more targeted way. Going to move to shift towards clients. So what we're seeing, and for the first time in years, we are seeing clients demand above and beyond when hiring. There is a noticeable nervousness and caution in the market as clients want to ensure every hire is the right fit, both culturally and skill set wise. Clients are currently very risk adverse at the moment and want to make sure they have found the best match for their needs, and will often go looking for the unicorn hire. Clients are not just hiring based on qualifications, but are seeking candidates who show initiative, responsibility, and real ownership of their roles. And we're seeing that the hiring process is taking a lot longer now as well. So what would have been a 1 to 2 week process is now taking multiple interview stages and can take a month longer. Clients want to feel confident that they're making sure that their process is as fluid as possible, and they're getting the right person. So clients will often rely on agencies and headhunters because we shift through the overwhelming volume of CVs and portfolios, or will proactively go out and source that talent. So it saves them time and effort. We're also noticing that clients are increasingly turned off by high demands from candidates. So the candidates who are consistently succeeding are those who demonstrate a genuine passion for architecture, and where we see it's more important than ever to take the time to really understand where your interests and passions lie. And that clarity will set you apart in the hiring process. So quickly, how to get noticed. We are a big believer in the value of a well-crafted CV and portfolio. These documents are not only a showcase of how you think, but visually how you communicate your work, style, and personality. A strong portfolio demonstrates your suitability to the role, attention to detail, and conscientiousness. And my last top tip is, whether you're using agencies or sending your CV directly, is to pester and persevere. Follow up multiple times, be professional in your engagement, and even up to 7 times is the magic number for me to follow up with hiring managers or agencies. Thanks.
And just on that point about following up, I guess there's a nervousness on one side that it's like pestering and then you're seen as annoying or whatever, but there's a degree of looking passionate and willing enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hiring managers are so busy at the moment. And so through no fault of their own, emails are often missed. I will miss emails, and therefore a gentle nudge or a gentle reminder every week or 10 days is not harmful. Even we'll do it with clients when they're busy going through a hiring process, and 2 or 3 times a gentle, professional, polite email. There is no harm in that, in nudging somebody, especially with how busy everything is at the moment.
Brilliant. I love that. We're going to come back to all of our guest speakers when it comes to questions. So we'll leave it there for the moment, and we're going to move on to Eleni, and we'll come back to you, Hazel, with all of your wisdom. Eleni.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eleni Stathi. I'm an associate partner at HTA Design. I suppose I'm involved with women in architecture and assisting Tania on the mentoring program this year. I suppose there's certain aspects that Hazel mentioned that are just so important from us, as Hazel would call us, clients on the architecture side, as people that are recruiting, and that I'd like to focus on that genuine passion for architecture and genuine passion for doing the job, which can shine through somebody's CV covering letter to really show us, when we're looking through multiple CVs, why this person is really the right candidate for the job. But I'm going to start a little bit earlier of how we look at the recruitment process here at HTA. We are specialized in architecture. We specialize in housing, so that makes it not necessarily easier, but what we would like to see from the candidates that apply to HTA, especially those that come at slightly senior positions, architect and above, is an understanding of housing, is an understanding of regulations within the housing sector, because that's very important for us. It shows the suitability, I suppose, of the candidates for the job that we wish them to perform. We do have a pro forma questionnaire that we ask our candidates to complete, and that is it's suited to the right kind of job role that we are advertising. So, for example, if we're looking for an architect or a senior architect, we will ask for project leading experience. If we're looking in that pro forma or ARB registration, and then that allows us to look at the suitability at an early stage before we even go into the CVs. I think it's very important. There's loads of debate, I suppose, about the importance of a covering letter. I personally, when I look at a number of candidates, I really like reading through the covering letters. You can just see how I get amazed by people. I think, you know, the work that we do is because of how great people are, and we work in teams and we collaborate with teams. And there's so much you can tell by reading that covering letter that somebody has written about why are they suitable for the role we are recruiting. And I suppose what we will be looking to see there is, first, please address your letter to the right organization. You'll be surprised how many times I've received a covering letter headed to a different architectural practice. But also, you know, what's really critical is how do your skills match the job role that you're applying for, and that can shine through the covering letter. If you're a part two, you know, why you're the best person at drawing, or why you're really good at visualizations, why have you got so much energy about learning, you know, if you're an architect, what's your experience in housing, you know, why you would be the right person for the job. That can really shine through a covering letter. Also, you know, we're architects, and visuals, what we play a lot is our visual presentation. So the way a CV is composed, you know, we write a lot of reports, we present a lot of local authorities to our clients. We should be able to put a CV that really expresses what we are about in a very visual, captivating manner. So we do look at the CVs a lot, and we do look obviously at the examples of work that are provided, which is great. You know, this is where it becomes even more fascinating from our side to look at all the amazing projects that everybody has worked on, and what experiences they've had, and actually how their experiences can help us be a better organization, how they can fit in the team. But what we're also looking for is the examples that people are putting together are suitable for the role. So, you know, again, if you're a part two applying for a position in HTA, I would expect to see loads of drawings. I would expect to see loads of projects. I would expect to see, you know, visualizations, model making, something that skills that perhaps we might not have, or we might want to have even more here at HTA. If you're applying for a senior kind of project lead role, we would like to see what jobs you have led and what your role has been in those jobs, and how suitable they are to the work that we do here. And then on the interview, when we go through the interview, think one of the areas that we found lately it has become quite difficult to do successfully is the kind of portfolio review, and that's because of the over reliance on examples of work that are forwarded with a CV. There is so people are holding back from their portfolio. They just give us the same examples of work. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see a full portfolio. I'd like to see the examples of the CVs, but I'd like to see a full portfolio coming in an interview, and real conversation in depth about the project work. And I suppose, you know, it's very important for us, especially at HTA. I can't talk about other organizations. We do take a lot of pride in the team that we are creating across the whole practice. We are known for being Employer of the Year a number of years. There's a reason for that, because we do actually work really well together, and we are so focused on staff retention. So, as Hazel said, the suitability of that candidate, and maybe we are part of the unicorn, Hazel, I don't know, maybe we are, but you know, that suitability of the candidate is so important to us, and how they fit culturally in HTA. I think I'm going to stop there, Tania. Hopefully you will come back to me later on.
Can I just pick up on the point there? I mean, you're raising a really good with, you know, the covering letter, and I think there's a lot of people going, well, how important is that? You know, everything should be in my CV. But the covering letter is kind of filling the gaps, isn't it, with what you can't necessarily show in this really concise CV. But I guess it's just to shine a light on the fact that, you know, you might get 200 applications for like a single role, and what is your, so the covering letter is something that is a go-to for you, but what else is like a standout thing that will enable you to at least dive deeper into the CV for these, like, say you've got 200 applications?
It's the covering letter, Tania, is the only chance you get for your personality to come through in the absence of an interview. So in the occasion where you have got 200 CVs, and we do occasionally get 200 CVs for maybe 2 positions, especially at the Part 2 level, this is the only chance you've got for your personality to come through, using words. So I'd like to see passion for the job, passion for doing architecture. Our work, our job is creative. We are in the creative industry, and like it or not, we take a buzz. It's buzzing to see somebody really, really loving their field, and it can really, really shine through a letter.
It can be infectious, actually, can't it? When
Absolutely.
people are passionate around you and all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We're going to come back to you on some of these questions, okay? And I think you're giving a brilliant insight into how it is to receive all these applications. Chloe, can I come to you next, please?
Hi all. I come from an architectural background, but currently I took the leap to work developer side. It's a slightly different perspective. You're more of a potentially minority amongst a number of different people whose opinions matter in the business. And I work for Mount Amble, who specialise in housing, and we do housing across London. At our company, we have not only, as I said, design manager function, we have technical coordinators, technical managers, and all of these roles require an architectural background. They work alongside the design teams on the projects, and we're all really important parts of delivering projects. If it's sort of less, it's not the competition end of the architectural spectrum, it's the getting the work done side of things. And something I also do is host the Thursday meetups so the monthly meetups for women in architecture, and this I found is a great opportunity to mix with others who may have taken a less conventional architecture path as well. I took the leap to client side many years ago, but however, I have recruited 2 members to my team within the last few months. These candidates came from practice, and they showed a desire to learn around the topic, and so we call it sort of a learn it all mindset. We realised that there's going to be gaps by recruiting from practice, but those that want to sort of take account for might be logistics, it may be budgets, it can be a wide-ranging, it could be sales input. So all these functions within Mount Amble tie into how you're guiding and delivering a successful scheme. And our recruitment process, very fortunate to have a recruitment team who brought the candidates to me and worked out which ones showed the right skill set. So first off is a technical interview, just to ensure that we have capable candidates, and we also have what we call a cultural interview. This is probably quite different in the market, so I can't say this is a reflection of elsewhere, but we see as a valuable part of showing your true self, showing how you where your passions are, where you succeed, what keeps you going, as well as where you've perhaps tripped up in the past, how you've dealt with that, how you've dealt with complications with projects or complications with people. And we're really looking for those that we all know that we're human, but it's those that can navigate or be willing to sort of try different ways to get the best outcome.
Like you said there, that's such an unusual approach to have the technical and then a cultural fit interview. And I think you mentioned that those can be conducted by different people in your organization, right?
That's right. So in order for us all, we call it sort sort of helping the team win, and we consider ourselves across the business, whether you're in finance, sales, marketing, technical, design, land and planning, we're all one team, and so we're all brought in for recruitment process to hire teammates. So we're not looking for, oh, I want to work with that person, I want them in my team. So hence why I have a team across the business that also supports getting the candidate. But you get to see the candidates' sort of true colours.
And I think the other thing you touched on there, which I think might be news to some people, I mean, you're an architect who's moved to client side, and so you have this personal appreciation for what skills architects can bring to developers. But I'm just wondering, in terms of how a job is advertised, and how, kind of how easy it is or what you'd recommend for architects who don't see themselves as design managers yet, but potentially have the right skills to and the willingness to step into that space. What is your advice if they see an ad that doesn't kind of fit the title that they're looking for? But yeah,
I think something that Eleni touched on is, it depends what your passions are, and so if you can see yourself on the side of delivering projects, then technical coordinator, technical manager is the job title typically used in the market. But if there's crossover skills, I'd say go for it, because there's an opportunity to find out more. There's an opportunity to sort of wheel out, is it actually a path you want to take? You could take a contract role. I know that's been an in for some of my colleagues. They've contracted, say, a fixed term, give it a go. But in general, there's a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and it's lovely to see how you're not. It blurs the lines between client and consultant. So client meaning like the developer, and consultant meaning the architects. You're actually all one team. You're all in it together. So it's a lovely role to be in. There's elements of project managing, there's elements of problem solving, but you're all sort of bringing the project forward.
I love that. That's a brilliant sell to anyone who's sitting on the fence going, wonder if I could, I wonder if I should. There you go. Thank you so much. We'll come back to you. I'm sure there'll be some questions directed at you because of what you've just shared with us. Carol, I can't see whether you're on the call just yet, but if you are, can you please unmute yourself?
I am. I'm unmuted and on video. Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yes. Hello.
Good. Hi. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm an architect and senior lecturer based in Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art in Dundee. And my practice work was primarily London and then latterly Scotland. And I started teaching part-time, well, still in practice in Scotland, and then moved to a full-time academic role in 2016. So I'm very much in the kind of educator realm now. So I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle. I lead programs at Part 1 and Part 2, and then we're quite a small school, so teach across all the year groups. And the focus is very much teaching. I'm not a research academic, and I've got a particular interest in collaborative practice and live projects in architectural education, just because it gives us different ways of assessing the breadth of skills that you're needing to be in professional practice. And our Dundee graduates, they tend to develop quite a good balance of the practical and the creative. I think we're based in an art college. We also run collaborative modules across architecture, planning and engineering. And that just helps with those communication skills before you get out into practice, and helps, I guess, broaden understanding across the different consultants as well. And I feel that there's been quite a significant shift in the role of the architect since I qualified about 25 years ago. There's just so many different forms of practice, much more collaborative models, the kind of stronger responses to social and climate concerns, and that context continues to evolve. Following the ARB's recent review, there's been a whole educational reform, but that also has an impact on practice as well. There's definitely a move towards a sort of wider range of routes to becoming an architect, broader experience base, more practice and education relationships, bringing in more voices. So it's definitely moving in a really interesting direction. And we're, like every other accredited school, we're in the middle of a course restructure at the moment. And part of what we're looking at is ARB's requirement that learning providers, being universities, would have a clearer coordinating role in the professional practical experience, and that there would also be what they term an entitlement to mentoring and support in the workplace. And I know there are a lot of practices that have amazing mentoring frameworks and are fantastic at supporting students as they move through. And at the other end of the scale, there are some where that's a real issue. And I think there is a move towards a bit more consistency there, and having educators involved in that process more too. So we hope to be developing stronger relationships between education and practice, and to be able to offer support as a network, because it's a really, really time-pressured industry. So we know that there's not lots of time in practice to be leading people by the hand, and I guess that's something to consider when you're also applying for practice experience. I think I really strongly feel that although there's an education reform at the moment, there is very much a need for the academic side and that kind of space for developing a design process, understanding what your interests and concerns might be, and managing to develop that range of skills in quite a safe space. You can experiment, you can fail within the projects that you do. Then there's the practice side of it that's absolutely vital. You're not going to be able to replicate that completely in an academic environment. So there still needs to be that real relationship between the two. I think we probably follow a fairly similar model to most schools in that our kind of first couple of years are really about that kind of professional context, sort of ARB, RIBA, talking about design teams, consultants, throwing in some group work, communication skills, all of those manual and digital skills that you need, oral presentation, written work, bringing in a little bit of regulations and legislation at that point, and really building up those fundamentals and an awareness. And then for us, third year, as you're getting towards the end of part one, that one we really think about as the preparation for practice year. And that's where I think sort of picking up what Hazel and Eleni had said about cover letters, CVs, putting together a folio and putting that together as a really kind of professional body of work. Because the first moment somebody sees that's you already making an impression. So really trying to think about how to curate your brand, I suppose. What's the kind of professional profile you want to put out there? And then I suppose at that point, there's building an awareness of CDM, health and safety, all of those all that terminology that comes in, kind of understanding what the context of that professional role is. And we'll build in collaborative working, live projects where we can, not necessarily live build, but they might be something about meeting a client with a site and discussing all of the brief development, that side of thing. It might be kind of feasibility type things, but trying to build that in where we can as well. Getting used to those different communications processes, different audiences, getting comfortable sort of being out with that studio environment where you're kind of surrounded by architects. So it's kind of get out of there, be in a different environment, and there's a different way of pitching things usually. And then I think when we get to part two, most of our students would have been on a year out by that time. It's really about kind of reflection on that and then kind of planning ahead to the future career as well, getting slightly more specialist in the research that you might do. And I think those, is quite a kind of step-by-step process, I guess. And I think that will change with the ARB reforms. I think that sort of 3 years, year out, back for 2 and then off again, that year out in the middle is quite tricky for us in Scotland at the moment, and I think it is wider than that as well. It's because with the living wage changes, it's not much more to start recruiting and getting a Part 2 student. So I think at the moment, Part 1s, it's quite tricky to get the work experience. So I think a lot of schools are looking at how we can actually build that into the curriculum, and that to be credit bearing as well, and just build up some really solid relationships. So I think, and to sort of summarize the sort of things I was thinking about in terms of recommendations, I think that demonstrating professionalism from that very first moment, kind of curating that professional profile is absolutely key. Definitely check that digital footprint. Just see what's out there. What's your, review your privacy settings, Google yourself, use social media, like flip it round, use social media to actually demonstrate the breadth of your skills and include, I think, Eleni, you mentioned it, sort of that idea of your process, what your thought processes are, different ways of working. If you're really good at sketching, get that in there, because not everybody will have that in their bag of tricks. And building your network. And I think if you're on this call anyway, you're probably already really aware of that because you're involved with women in architecture, but it's never too early to start building that supportive network around you, maximizing those opportunities, and use that time in education to really take up any opportunity that's going if you possibly can. Put yourself forward for things, work with peers. We have student societies that bring guest lecturers in, and they have immediate contacts with practitioners who they then might go on to get jobs with as well, using things like degree shows, exhibitions, public events. Get beyond the architecture studio as well and get yourself out there. So I think that's my roundup.
Thank you. There's some brilliant advice in there, and I'd love to come back to you really, and once we've gotten some questions in terms of trends that people coming in to want to research and do further work in terms of masters and PhDs, but we'll come back to that if you don't mind, just in case we run out of time. Natalie, can I invite you? I can't see you, but I'm hoping you're on the call. Natalie. Oh, Natalie.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Sorry, there was like
there we go
to get me there. I'm here. Sorry about that.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is really great, and so many of our observations are just crossing over, which is really lovely. So I'm one of the mentors as well for the program. I am currently unemployed, so I'm sort of a different space to everybody else. My previous role was director of strategy for a practice which at one point was 150 people, 3 offices, 10 studios. That role was very wide ranging, so there were lots of aspects to it, which was super cool. But two key parts of it I was overseeing. So at one point, so one was the workload and resourcing. So who was on which projects, what stage were those projects on, how many hours did we have, where the programs are. So obviously that feeds into recruitment as you're winning new work, as you're repositioning people within the practice. The other part was quality management. And so I oversaw the ISO 9001, 14001 certifications, which also feeds into recruitment because you're looking at skill sets across the office, making sure that there isn't any risk with knowledge gaps in the office, that when you're pitching for any work, you have specialist expertise within the practice. And so that sort of all fed into the same thing. So I don't know if from a candidate's perspective, if that's something that you want to ask about when you're interviewing. Are you being put into a new project that has just been won by the office, or are you part of a wider picture to fill broader needs within the practice? Either way, it doesn't matter too much because the practice is investing in your recruitment. They are spending money to bring you in if they're using an agent or not. So I think that's worth bearing in mind, that they want someone who's going to fit, who's going to participate, who wants to stick around and thrive. And it sort of comes through, as Eleni was saying as well, that from the business perspective, we want to know what you enjoy doing and what you want to do now and in the future, because there is that sort of like, I'll come into the practice now, I really love this job, sounds interesting, but in time I want to do that. And I think people want to know that when you're interviewing with them, and for that to shine through when you're talking about your projects and your industry engagement and your teamwork and your skill sets, because you want to bring on all those aspects when we're interviewing you. So that role I resigned from and left last August, and that put me into the daunting position, which I think a lot of people on this call are probably in, where you have to start your CV and your portfolio from scratch, and you're thinking, okay, we've got to do this, and so what do I, you've got to start there. So then going to more of a candidate perspective, I guess, and I also now I'm very excited that I'm starting a new role in 2 weeks. So I've kind of gone through the whole thing now. So this is sort of advice from me from business and from just going through this freshly. When I've been in other mentoring relationships before, I've heard a lot of people say, I've had enough, I don't want this anymore, promises aren't being fulfilled, I don't like the team or the work or the workload or whatever it is, but they're quite broad reasons why somebody might be now looking for a role. And I think that's quite difficult, because then they'll meet somebody like Hazel and she'll ask a bunch of questions and they're a bit like, oh, I don't know specifically what I want. But I think that's okay, because I think as you start working through your CV and your portfolio, you get excited about different parts of it when you're working on it, and you're like, actually, this is a bit that I enjoy more. Actually, I'm really good at this part of it. I enjoy this stage more than that stage. And so I think it's really good to take note of that when you're working, putting those documents together. And I also think it's good to be open-minded when you're going to different practices, or when you see, I mean, it might be not through an agent, it might just be through a job description somewhere online. If it's a bigger practice, if it's a smaller practice, you might not have the experience to say whether or not you prefer one or the other. And so just go and talk to them both. As long as you're not wasting anyone's time, you're building more information for yourself to make educated decisions, or to cancel out an option and say, okay, well, I've spoke to a couple of residential practices and actually I still want to stay in commercial. That, I think it's really useful just to speak to as many people as you can. I also found it useful to speak with people who I'd previously worked with. So either ex-colleagues, clients, consultants, because I thought I was going to say to them, what are other practices like and who do you like working with? But inevitably the conversation turned to, we enjoyed working with you for these reasons. And so that helped me build more of a narrative as well around, actually, this is where my passion lies more, or this is where I want to grow more, for instance. My CV, I found myself tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, because I think, as you're saying, with all presentations, we're quite good at putting them together. When it's for yourself, you're like, what's quite perfect? I showed it to a graphic designer friend. She threw her hands up and said, they're all perfectly fine, just choose one and go with it, basically. And now my advice for that would be, keep a format and match it for every single project that you do, so that in the same space as the client, the value, the RIBA stages that you had experience on, because you might find yourself talking through those pages in the first instance and you don't want to be finding information, you just want it there so you can see it straight away. Going to Eleni's comment about Carol's with the presentations, and you want to have more information, if you are asked to present on a screen, put in more information, but only put it in one file. You don't want to be clicking around and losing yourself, because then you'll focus on that, you'll forget where you're at. So I think those are really good things to know. Also, who you're meeting with. What is their position? Why are they meeting with you? What are they interested in talking about? Then you can think about what your experience is that's going to be relevant to their interest group. Are they the technical side? Are they the design side? Are they the, I don't know, the person who comes in to vet for the social connection within the office. So I think it's really important to find out as much about those interviews as you can. And perhaps not to be too worried about the slow moving, because as Hazel's saying, the market is a bit funny at the moment. So things might move slowly, but take that as an advantage to go and see other people and to build your research of other practices and other roles that are around. I think that was really useful. References, I think this is one of my last points. I was surprised that some people ask for references very, very quickly. And so it can be useful to have a range of references. One practice specifically said to me, project manager, and I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that one. Okay, so that's fine. So project manager, client, consultancy team is good in terms of how you work within a team group, maybe a past colleague. It's obviously all confidential. You've got to be trusting of who you're speaking with, but I think that's quite useful as well, just to have that as you're working through your project sheet. Start to think about people that you've worked closely with. And I think that's probably good for me for now. I'll jump in with other questions.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of questions, I'm sure, that will be directed to you, given you've got the experience on both sides. I loved your advice there about going and speaking to people, be it colleagues, clients, not necessarily just random people, but people that you can genuinely seek some feedback from, because I think that is brilliant advice, especially if it's been a while since you've been through the interview process or through recruitment. And certainly what you're talking about there in terms of references, is certainly more applicable to senior roles than junior roles. But really, what would you give advice to for somebody who's just really starting out on their journey? Because I mean, you're at the other end and you've got some time to decide, and it sounds really exciting what you're about to do. We can't wait to see that in due course. Yeah. But if you're at the other end of the spectrum, what advice would you have in terms of stepping out into the field right now?
So as a younger architect,
yes.
I think in terms of the preparation work, I think it's all exactly the same. It's just about building what you have. And if you've only made it up to stage 3 on 4 projects, that's okay, because you can still start to look at what your contribution was and get your storytelling in your head around your contribution to the team. Were you involved in meetings? Were you not involved in meetings? Are you able to say, I've been up to this stage, but I have the enthusiasm to do this next, or I would like to be more involved with this stage next? Or are you wanting to talk about specializing in early design? I think there's aspects of that you can still definitely take the same approach with.
I love that, and really I love the idea that when you're reaching out to people to have conversations with in order to prepare for the putting the portfolio together and preparing for interviews. Actually, you're road testing these stories, aren't you? You're seeing what's resonating with people, which will help you in the interview situations.
Yeah, and I think you need to think about the interviews as your interview as well. It's not that you're being interviewed. I think that's, especially when you're younger in your career, you're thinking, oh, I'm going in there, I have to say all the right things and da-da-da. But you're leaving somewhere for a reason. So you don't want to get back into the same place. So you need to make sure you're asking the questions that finds you a more positive space.
Thank you so much. Vaso, are you on the call? I'm conscious we're getting near the end of the call as well. I'm sure there's so many questions that we still need to deal with. But Vaso, are you on the call, please?
I am on the call. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the very insightful contribution so far. So I'm the latest addition, Tania. We were communicated earlier this week, and I'm in a similar position to Natalie. I changed jobs recently, and we thought that perhaps I can put some bullet points together and share my experience with the rest of you.
Because it's so fresh, yes.
Yeah, well, we talked about how a lot of companies now, especially multidisciplinary companies in the UK, they prefer to have their own recruitment teams and in-house recruitment teams, and they prefer to recruit through this method. But this sometimes may take a little while. So there are 2 scenarios when we are looking for jobs. We're either looking for our first job, 3 scenarios, either looking for our first job, or either looking to change from where we are, or we are looking to change for no, because we don't have any other choice. There is no other option to go back to where we were. So in scenarios where there is time available, these internal recruitment processes and may work well. I personally found that working with agents, it was more straightforward because they had spaces available and they acted more quickly than this in-house recruitment teams. Now, that comes with some caveats. The agents, and Hazel is on the call, I'm going to speak on your behalf, but from my experience, I found that agents don't like to share. So if you approach one agent, they don't like if you approach a second agent. That's what I found from my experience. But at the end of the day, I found that, especially when you're restricted with time, you need to put yourself out there and explore all the options available to you. So my advice would be to approach a second agent if you don't think that you can reach your potential with the first one you approached. Now that if somebody is looking to change jobs, my piece of advice to people that are already employed and look to change is to check their contracts. Especially in smaller companies, there are some restrictive covenants in there that may put you in a very difficult position to find an alternative position. So if you check your contracts and the wording carefully, just to ensure that they don't make you unemployable for the next position. And just a reminder to everybody that it is the employer's responsibility to provide a valid contract for everybody. And you can ask now that you're in friendly terms with them to alter the terms of this contract to help you find another position in future. Now, if I did enjoy as well interviews where the interviews were focusing on skills and experience, and I absolutely get what Natalie was saying. It is a two-way process. You don't want to fall into previous territories, and you want to check out the new place to make sure that you like where you're going, and it doesn't compare well. It doesn't have the negative things that the previous place had and force you to leave. In terms of agents and dealing with agents, what I found from my experience is that sometimes, yeah, it is, as Natalie was saying, the first person that you contact, and you have to go through all the details about all the reasons why you want to leave. Sometimes it's not easy to summarize them in one sentence. The more experience one has in the sector, the more difficult it becomes to summarize that in one sentence. What I found difficult, though, to answer was when they were asking me how much I would like in terms of salary for the position I was after. And I found it difficult because, again, I come from an older generation of architects that I'm a little suspicious in questions like this. So I was reversing the question, and I was asking back, how much would the company be willing to offer for my skills? Or how much would they offer for a male colleague? So I was reluctant to answer this question directly, but I was trying to find a way of understanding how much they would be willing to offer as well, because agents, they wouldn't put you forward for a position if it was a no from day one. And the other question that I was a little hesitant to answer is when they were asking me what sort of flexibility I was after. And again, being a little suspicious whether I would be compared, or whether this question was for a female employee only, and I would be directly compared to a male colleague that may go in and say, I don't need any flexibility, I can be in the office 5 days a week. So I don't have answers for that, but I just wanted to share with you that some questions out there are a little difficult to answer.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Hazel, we'll give you a moment to respond to some of these things, because I know you've set up your practice to be completely different to the way other recruiters work for number one. But can I just say, clearly there's a happy ending with you at the moment, Vaso. You're in employment and you've gone through the process now and you are settling into your new practice. So there's a happy ending at this moment in time.
It is. Thank you. And thanks for the invitation, Tania.
Hazel, do you want to respond to anything there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are many points on there. First, on the flexibility, we will always ask about flexibility. For me, it's not about discluding anybody. It's more about understanding what you might need, whether there is pick-up or drop-off. Some parents do need that, and I will also ask male candidates as well if they have little ones, and it's mentioned on the call. And interestingly, with both genders, the men will say to me directly, "I need this," and so it's already out there. They are more direct in saying that. So if there are parents on this call and you are dealing with agents, my thoughts would be is make that really clear and those expectations, because we wouldn't want to put you into a position where that is compromised later on. So it's definitely not a trick question. It's to make sure that the role is going to suit that around your needs. And there's a lot more flexibility with that now. Things like work from home as well. Salary, also a difficult one. We want to understand where you are. If we're putting you forward for, let's say, £120,000 role and you're only on 50,000, that's probably not going to work. And it probably wouldn't be that dramatic. But we also want to know that if you're maybe earning £100,000, for example, that the role that you're being put forward for is a £75,000 role, and there's sort of equals levels there. So I don't know how other agencies work necessarily, but we're not doing it to catch you out. We're very much focused on transparency and honesty and making sure it's the best fit for you. Anything else? Yes, lots of questions. We do ask a lot of questions, and I think we want to work out where, and it's this, we almost call ourselves like career therapists, or we are consultants, because you never have the opportunity to talk about you. And this is a moment to do that, and to reflect on your career and where you're at, the things that are important to you. And maybe gender as well as women, we don't really step back and think about that because there's lots of other things and factors around, and we are the last person that we think about. So I really want to get to know what those important things are. And sometimes it's many questions to figure that out. And sometimes you're telling us and you probably don't realize what you're saying, but it's sinking in my mind. And then we can reflect that or articulate that back to you. And then there's sort of this aha or this click moment. But it is difficult because you've never, or you've been like, I don't know, Natalie, for example, for 17 years in one practice, there's a lot of time there that you then have to reflect and digest on. So difficult questions, but they are for good reasons, is my thoughts.
And can I just expand upon the transparency thing? Because I would say that, yeah, a lot of women in particular would struggle to say, I would demand this amount of money, even if they should be doing those things. And I'm sure you behave differently in that you might be encouraging them to say, well, is it this kind of window? Is this kind of band? Or is this kind of, zone? You should be thinking, you're looking at your skills, looking at your CV, you can demand something like this. Because I think a lot of women especially just don't go in and demand, and might be coming across as not as sure about their worth. And that's something we've got to work on, and we've got to help each other, I think. But equally in terms of not wanting to appear as though they've got all these demands so that they're precluded from a role to work. Because once you get into a place and you get to know people, and then you can start negotiating the terms. I mean, you don't want to be in a wrong situation. I completely get that. But you also just want to be given a chance to even get to an interview, to have the conversation, to see whether there's a connection. And there's a careful balance here, isn't there, about just saying all the things up front, which means you don't even get to, the door is not opened for you, versus I'm going to be just a little bit, a bit more flexible in terms of what the terms are in order to sit in front of these people to understand whether this is right. And like Natalie is saying, it's an interview on both sides in that situation.
Oh, it is absolutely a two-way interview, and you are interrogating the client as much as they are interrogating you. And we actively support that with questions when we're going with candidates through the process. But expectations are made clear, and we are very transparent with that. I think sometimes we have to be realistic as well. So there is an honesty there. But the strange side is, at the moment, I'm calling it the Wild West of salaries, because there is no benchmark, there is no measure. One practice might be paying 55,000, another practice for the same role might be paying 95 or even 45. there's a huge gap there, and that does not make sense. It does not make sense for me. And different practices have different levels. Eleni, I don't know if that makes sense for you and your experience of hiring and taking people through the hiring process. So it's a real challenge because there is just no benchmark or medium here for us to work to.
It is absolutely right, Hazel. And also, commercial practices potentially they pay differently to residential housing practices, just because the economics and the cost of the housing market is completely different to the commercial market. Yes.
Can I open up to any one of you to answer this in terms of, we've got lots of international students and international architects who, in some instances are struggling to get their qualifications recognized. Some instances are struggling with their names and being recognized, even invited to interviews, and all sorts of issues happening here. But can any of you shed some light on some advice for, in particular, international students and international architects?
For international architects, in my experience, you don't necessarily need to be ARB or RIBA registered. A lot of practices will just simply look at your portfolio and your capabilities, and there won't be an issue. So that's in my experience. I've spoken to, across the years, I'm registered in New Zealand, just to put that into play. So across the years, I've spoken with different people through different mentoring programs. Do I need to cross over? Do I not? And I think your work can speak for you, but different practices may have different approaches to that. So that's not across the board. Also, the relationship between the recognition between ARB and international universities has changed over the last couple of years with, I think it's Australia, New Zealand, maybe Canada, I'm not sure. So some of them are now a switch over recognition, whereas before it was a much more arduous process. So it's worthwhile contacting them to ask if you can, what the process would be for you.
And in terms of some practices offer to support visas and others don't, and this isn't always obvious from a website, obviously, and it requires probably a conversation with HR before you're even entitled to submit an application, I'm assuming. But again, is there any advice there in terms of negotiating visa support?
Practices usually will either have yes or no on visa support. And so you're right, there is no clarity on websites. There are practices that we know that do support with visas, and it tends to be the larger international firms, your likes of Foster and Partners and the big names, because they have the power to be able to do that. To take somebody through a visa process, including lawyers, can be anything from £5,000 to £6,000 on top of somebody's salary, plus the visa expense on top. So it's really challenging for small UK practices to take that on board. There are also the issues now with sponsorship and the salaries being raised to over £38,000. And that's a huge demand on practices for the salary versus the level of experience that means. So I don't necessarily think that's an architecture problem specifically. It's where our government needs to change that policy to support. But for anybody going that, target the big practices, go to the big names, get your experience there. They also do support with qualifications and Part 3s. And you are then with an international cohort. There's a lot of comfort there, we find, with international architects going into that. I realise, though, in saying that, it's not ideal for everybody because it's not the place that they want to be. And so the industry is challenged with that at the moment.
And can I also throw in a question regarding AI, the use of AI in scanning and filtering through CVs and portfolios, et cetera, what is currently happening and where's the trend going, do you think?
Was that a question to Hazel, Tania?
No, just broadly to all of our guest speakers. In fact, anyone who might want to offer some first-hand experience in this. And I don't know whether, Chloe, you've got any response here in terms of, you've got a very sophisticated recruitment system. Is AI a part of that at the moment?
I don't know. We do have, trying to think how many we have 3, if not more, recruitment colleagues of a company shy of 200 people. So it sounds like, I think to me, it sounds like they're doing the legwork, and we're not relying on AI at this moment.
But certainly, I think there's a fear, isn't there, that I spend all this time writing a beautiful cover letter and a CV, and AI will decide whether I fit the profile or I don't.
True. Tania, can I add to this? Well, we are not at HTA. We're not using AI to shift through CVs. So that's and it's not. What happens is we have a hiring team, which is not the HR managers. It is people that will be hiring, people like myself. It's usually 2, 3, 4 associates, probably the people that are looking for candidates in their teams. So and we do it collaboratively. And what I mean collaboratively, obviously I said we've got a pro forma questionnaire, which would the candidates fill in that pro forma questionnaire. So that's the first thing we look at. But we do that collaboratively. So, me and another associate partner will sit. Well, I will have shifted some CVs. He or she will have, and then we come together and then we decide collectively. And it's not done by AI. It's done by an enormous kind of understanding of all the kind of importance of doing the job properly.
Yes. I would add that there isn't many, or I don't think there are any practices out there at the moment scanning CVs or portfolios with AI, because we need skill sets and humans for this. You might see that in lawyers' practices, or maybe outside the realms of architecture, but not that I'm hugely aware of. Where we do see AI being slightly problematic now is the use of ChatGTP, and I will get emails from people where certain bits have been highlighted in bold, and so I know that is a ChatGTP message and they haven't edited that. Now, in some ways that's great because it's a way to communicate if English is not your first language, but also then it's not natural to you. So we are saying use ChatGPT to maybe check, but don't use it as a fully rounded document to represent who you are. This needs to be authentically from yourself, from what you're interested in, and not something that's been manufactured based on a little bit of text that you've put in.
And especially as we were discussing earlier and that Eleni brought up with the covering letter, this is your chance to show some character and personality, which AI simply cannot do in the way that you can. So by all means, use it as something to like as a baseline, something to give you some ideas, but then really do pore over it and make sure it represents you and it speaks in the way you speak. There was a brilliant question that came in about recommendations for acknowledging a career break, and I think a lot of us have certainly experienced this. So what advice you would have for this? Carol, I don't know whether you've got something to add here. Carol, you want to?
Oh, I guess, it might not be my area of expertise with being more the kind of student level I'm dealing with. But I think, I would always, I don't know, I think anybody that's recruiting would be, feel free to contradict me on it. But I think, I would be quite honest about any career breaks, and you're picking up other skills when you're on a career break potentially. So I think that's just adding to your personality and character, and it's actually something that could be valued as well. Something to bring up in interview too. It might be all sorts of different things that you can bring to a role from that different experience. So I think there was also maybe a question before this session about sort of dates in CVs and things like that. And I don't know if that comes from the same place where it's a kind of idea about like, what happens if there's a break in the CV? Does that look really suspect? But I think maybe, Hazel, I don't know, you would be seeing a lot more CVs than me, I think.
So I don't have any issues with career breaks, and we've seen a lot of those over the past 5 years with COVID. Things where there have been personal losses, there's been care, there's been burnout where people have just taken a break. We've seen a lot of people now take trips to Japan. That seems to be, Tokyo is on the list. People spending 2 weeks to a month So all supportive of that, go for it. So career breaks are not that bad Career breaks are not an issue as long as there is perhaps a bit of reasoning behind it. And because there's now a big shift and an awareness around mental health, people taking 2 to 3 months, if not longer, to take a break between careers, that's not frowned upon. So anybody that might be worried about that, I'd like to put your mind at rest and go, it's not an issue. Some people have done volunteering, taken a little bit of time off, but it can also just be to reset your mind and your head. So no issues from our side on that.
And obviously there's also been the issue in the last few years in terms of forced redundancies, something that's come unexpected. People haven't necessarily had their CVs and portfolios ready, and then they're thrown out into a marketplace that's got an overabundance of people that have but not by choice, are out of work. So I guess there's also people that are looking to how they can represent that. I mean, redundancy is one thing, but a forced career break and, how that's seen, and especially as we're talking about practices wanting to ensure a great fit and they don't want to take on any risk. And if you're hiring, you go on a break in 6 months or a year's time. Just thoughts on that, please.
I think the thing for anybody who has been made redundant, is it's not necessarily personal to you. This is a practice decision, and we've seen incredibly talented people let go because of a project. And so I think when you're going through that process, it's heartbreaking because you've given yourself to this role or this practice. And we have seen a lot of that over the past few years. So again, redundancy is not a dirty word. It's something to experience. You learn so much from that process. And a lot of the time, it's not down to you as an individual. It's just a company decision, although it may not feel like that at the time. And sometimes it's just being on the wrong project at the right time. And that's nothing to do with you. So again, redundancy is absolutely fine. We've seen that so many times over the past 5 years. So again, making sure people are comfortable with that rather than feeling uncomfortable, I guess.
And Eleni, is there anything you want to pick up there from a practice perspective?
Yes, absolutely right. We will never refuse an interview to somebody that has been made redundant. That would not be the reason that we will refuse an interview. So it's just over the last couple of years, it has been so difficult for practices, or most practices have been making redundancies. So it is not something to worry about. The skills to the role. It's still what we need to focus on rather than whether there has been redundancy in the past.
And
Tania, just to quickly add in, sorry, also just going back to the Carol's question about if you have dates or no dates, I think acknowledge if there's been a break, but I wouldn't suggest not putting dates in, because we need to know if you've been at your previous practice for 3 years or for 2 years or 5 years, what your pattern of movement does come into it, I think, when you scan through CV. So I think just months or years is enough to go, okay, well, there was a tenure. If there was a break, great, fine, let's have a chat about what you did and then go on. But I think don't just skip it all out. I think no information brings irrelevant questions into an interview, so it's better just to have the information there.
That's brilliant. And we also had a question come in earlier about, here we are in London, but we're often working for practices that have a global presence. Is there something that should be on our CVs to really represent us so that we can show that from London we can work on these projects globally? We are, globally, we are not from here, and therefore we've got all this. So is, something about this global aspect of the practices that we might be applying for that we can best represent in our CVs and covering letters?
Language can be helpful.
Yes.
If you're multilingual, bilingual, I think it's useful to have that in there, because when you do pick up on, if there's a work that you're doing in Germany, if there's work, I think that can be useful just for the overall knowledge in the office.
Because I know I certainly have conversations with people to say, look, I'm based here in London, but I've exclusively worked on projects in one country, and I'm struggling to be placed on projects here in the UK. And then when I might go and look for a job somewhere, I'm not considered relevant? Because I've lived in London, but I've been working in all these other places. It's a curious one, isn't it? Because I think a lot of the skills are translatable. Yes, there's local regulations, and yes, there's quirks to do with certain sectors, but we've got so many transferable skills, and I guess it's just about how we can translate that into a concise form in a CV and then convey in an interview. If we, that's obviously easier, but we need to get to the interview first.
Yeah, we see that a lot, and it's really challenging because we see those transferable skills. But when you have a client, let's say it's a residential scheme of 100 units in central London, and somebody's worked on a residential scheme in Hong Kong for the past 10 years, the client will always pick the person with the most relevant skills. So in situations like that, we will often advise somebody to try and get in with a practice where they have a global portfolio, but also have UK work. So then there's the opportunity to transfer. We see it a lot, and it's more through the client's wants and demands. And you potentially could get lucky, but it's sticking to those client briefs and what they want to meet that brief of their client and their project and their development team. So really hard, that.
Eleni, I know that we talked about this previously, but in terms of the part one and part two students,
yes.
What recommendations you have in terms of people applying to you before you're opening up positions, building up a relationship with you as a company, with individuals in the company? What recommendations would you have there?
I can only speak for ourselves. So with part ones, obviously it's an annual contract that we give our part ones, because we recognize, so the positions that we have, they are on a 12-month contract, because we recognize that how difficult it is for our part ones to get experience. So our contracts usually run from September to September. So we will be looking to fulfill our part one positions. I don't know how many there are going to be this year, between June and July. Really, that's so, and I assume that most practices for part one positions, that's when they will be looking to fulfill those positions just until August hits and holiday season. So to fill them from September. Part twos, and I saw there were a couple of messages here. One about newly part twos coming out of university without experience, but we're not expecting part twos to have experience. What we are expecting is part twos to have talent and an amazing love for architecture, and maybe just teach us some new tricks that we don't know. If I were to do a drawing, it will take me 300 hours on somebody that knows exactly what they're doing, right? And that's the way we are evolving. So it's the lack of experience at part two level is not something that we worry about, because the experience you will get in practice, that's what practice is for. But we do when we have positions for part twos, we go through a recruitment process. So it's not the same as our part ones, which we would encourage potentially, applications in the absence of an advertisement saying we're looking for part ones and part twos.
And Chloe, can I come to you in terms of you've got a really good, obviously very successful recruitment system going on, and you've evolved that over time. And what advice you would have for architectural practices, or really anyone recruiting? You've got the technical and the cultural fit side of things. I know there was a question there. What does cultural fit actually mean? And I think it means different things to different practices and different organizations. But what recommendations would you have for leaders who are about to embark on a recruitment process, knowing the market the way it is, and they desperately want to get the right people in the door, not waste any time, and ensure that it's just going to be a good fit?
I don't know whether I'm fully qualified to
yes,
to
you
answer
are.
That. I think you've got to bring yourself, you've got to bring your passions from that side. I think it's yes, we agree it's a difficult market, but attitude just shone above everything else to us. So it's just attitude to work, attitude to get things done, attitude just to work with different people across industry. Don't sort of, no one's too precious or too daunting or overwhelming, or it just put your big girl pants on and get on with it, really.
So it's definitely attitude on the, the side of the person interviewing, how open they are to who they're interviewing. And obviously if you're being interviewed and you're going through the process, it's showing your best side in terms of interviews. But I love what you're going on about there with Mount Anvil, that there's different people involved, and it's not specifically team, like hiring for your team. You're actually hiring for your organization. Hence you can have the conversation around fit, because it's beyond that specific team. And I think that more practices probably need to have some of this thinking when they're recruiting, that it's not just specifically for that project. They should be thinking about, well, it's this project right now, but actually it could be this project or that team going forward, or it's this part of the organization, or there's these skills gaps that we're trying to build across the practice.
I think there's definite opportunity to if you've got an opportunity to grow, you want to see people that want to have bring skills, as Eleni said, bring something that they do differently and share that across the business. And that's, I think, what's really I've benefited from, is them wanting more and more of different mindset, because I'm different from development managers, I'm different from sales team, I'm different from technical managers, and so it's just a keep sort of striving with difference and bringing ideas to the table, because if you keep doing the same thing, you're not getting, like, it's not progress, it's not getting better results, and we're very sort of results driven in the market.
100%. I know I'm conscious we're over time, but if there's somebody who wants to put their hand up and actually ask a question live, I'd be super open to that. So if you just want to put your hand up, because I can't see everybody on the screen, but as soon as you put your hand up, you will appear on the screen if anyone is game. And or if there's any last, Biani, is that Biani?
Hi, yeah. I'm Shraddha. Hi. It was a really good session. Thank you so much, everyone. My question is regarding the CV. Like, what's the first thing that you see in a CV and how long it should be?
Ooh. Eleni, go on.
I wouldn't say the CV needs to be longer than 2 pages. That means that the summary of your experience, your skills, your particular interests, not necessarily the examples of work. So 1 to 2 A4 pages is right, I think, for a CV. What is right, what is wrong? What was your other question?
What's the first thing you see? I love that question. What's the first thing you see? The pictures, right?
Well, it depends. No, we very rarely have got CVs with pictures, which I really like, actually. I don't really like CVs with pictures, to be honest, personally.
I meant drawings and images of projects, to be fair, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean that. I understood pictures of faces. It depends on what you have made stand out, I suppose. Because you will have made something stand out if you think it's important enough to stand out. So that's the first thing I'm going to see.
And I would also say, because I've obviously been through the recruitment process myself, and if you want to be able to, if someone looks interesting and you want to be able to find them on LinkedIn. So if anybody is like trying to look for a job and you're not on LinkedIn, please get on LinkedIn and write something on LinkedIn that isn't on your CV, and suddenly it feels like you know that person and you want to get to know them more. So I think they need to complement each other. I've certainly seen plenty of instances where it's, the cover letter, the CV, and the profile just all look exactly the same. I can't see anything more. I feel like even if I was to get in for an interview with you, I wouldn't find out anything more either. So have a bit of interest and use those different mediums, if you like, to show different sides of yourself.
If it helps, I always used to find photos really distracting on CVs. I just want to see what everybody has done. I don't want to see photos. It kind of, yeah.
But on something that Tania mentioned is, so if we are recruiting and the candidates that I would be interested to interview in particular, that I would definitely check their LinkedIn pages. Tania is absolutely right on that. And something that Carol mentioned on our digital footprint, we need to be aware of our digital footprint is very, very important. And employers, recruiters have got access to the digital footprint just because we share it, right? If we're on social media, everything is out there. So just be mindful about that, because it has sometimes, it has prevented me personally from inviting people for interview, that digital footprint.
Yeah, that's a good good advice. Does anyone else want to raise their hand and ask a quick question? I'm so conscious of time, but if you're willing, we're willing. Bandari, have I pronounced that correctly?
It's Sia.
Oh, Sia, okay.
Yeah. My question is to do with the portfolio. So you talked about having two different portfolios, one for sending in and one for the interview. What kind of length would be good for both of them?
Oh, I think I on the examples of work, we probably give a standard of 4 or 6 pages or something like that. I can't quite remember now because it changes with the applications, with the kind of job role. But I didn't mean 2 different portfolios. What I meant, Sia, is that I don't want to see the same 6 pages coming on an interview. So that one project that is a tiny little snapshot of an image in one page probably has got another 10 drawings that you're able to talk me through. And I think that's what I was because that's how the passion is going to come about that particular project. And that's what I meant, a full portfolio. As part 1s and part 2s, I don't know what your level is. Architects, we have got a portfolio of a lot of work. And I think this is what I meant. Don't think that because you've sent those 4-6 pages of examples of work that is the portfolio.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.
So Elena?
Yeah, hi. Thanks
Hi.
for everything. My question is, I'm a more experienced architect, so I think it's not for like entry level, but I think it would apply for everyone. I'm wondering what sort of signs you would be looking for in an interview and in a practice that will tell you that there's no cap, that they'll help you develop and there's no discrimination, and they'll help you, like, as a woman and general, what sort of signs you would look for besides the usual looking for women in like management roles. And
That's a great question. I don't know, Hazel, can I point this one to you at this first point?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I think seeing other women around in the office, I think usually you can sense how an office is going in there to visit them, but it's asking them, and this is why you then interview them. It's like, how do you develop your architects? And if there are things that are important to you in your career development that you want to achieve, is asking them, this is where I want to get to. How are you as a practice going to support this? What are the measures that you're going to take? Are there courses that you need to take? What is the time scale? How many percentage of hours that are non-billing hours can you commit to that level of progression or that career development? And seeing how they respond, they will, if they're not comfortable, they will stutter, you will sense it. If they've done this before and they have clear progression, which is most practices are putting a huge amount of effort into this at the moment because it's huge across the industry. Architects are keen on that career development, what it means to get to the next step. So it's through really good questions, asking the hiring managers at the time.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks.
It's a great
Tania,
question, and I'm so glad that you're alert to that. And yeah, doing some research, I guess, in terms of what you can see online, looking at organizations' digital footprint and what they're saying about some of these issues, I think is key.
Yeah, can I just add something to what Hazel said? I think we're thinking of an interview as an interview that the candidate needs to answer questions. I think we also need to think that the interview is also for us to answer questions as we are recruiting. So we encourage obviously questions, and we are a bit suspicious of candidates that don't ask questions. So the more questions you have for us, you hit us with, the better it is.
I love that. We're suspicious if you don't ask questions, so come with questions. I love it. Duni.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more
Sorry.
thing. There was
Yeah.
a documentary, it was Karen Brady, I think, and she said that when she applied for her job, she made them put in their contract that she would get paid equally as her counterpart who had, like the male counterpart who had the same position as her. And I don't know if that would be a ridiculous thing to ask in our industry. I mean, she is now successful, so she can ask for anything. But if someone who is not successful or doesn't have the name, would that sound ridiculous, or what would your opinion be?
Ooh, Hazel, you want to answer that one?
It's an amazing thought. I've not ever been through a process like that before, but I'd almost want to try it. However, we have to make sure then that the experience is relevant, that you are matched with, let's say, a male counterpart. I am seeing salaries being a lot fairer within architecture, and I think there's a lot of I'm going to call it and say there is a bit of false information out there about women being paid less because the stats that they're measuring are not accurate, and they're taking non-architectural trained individuals and adding that data to the overall data, which might include marketing or admin, which is bringing things down. But I think it's a great shout and would encourage women to have that conversation either directly with that practice or with agencies that they're working with. Go for it.
Yeah, I've actually definitely had experience in practice where trying to minimize the pay gap was a serious concern, but they were also going about it in a way that didn't seem very transparent in terms of promoting some people that weren't architects that were women in order to minimize the pay gap, but it wasn't architects with architect. It was not parity at all. So yeah, I think you need to be careful about some people who might, or some practices who might be being very loud and vocal about some of these issues, but not really understanding how it is. So I think it's definitely worth asking the question, and it's about how you're asking it, so that you look really proactive, and that you're standing behind your worth. I think that is brilliant. Dunny.
I think a lot of practices are being called out now, so they can't really underpay. We see it more in the bigger practices and the big commercial offices, but there's a lot more transparency. It's not perfect. But again, if I found out that one of our clients wasn't paying a woman the same as a man, I would bin them. No, we're not doing this. This is not right.
Dunny, so we get to you finally. Dunny, we get to you now.
Okay, thank you so much. That was really great, and I've just really enjoyed hearing everyone's thoughts and just advice. A bit of a weird question, but I guess what would, maybe for Natalie and Hazel, but what would your opinion, I guess, what would a practice's attitude be towards a part 2 who's potentially still doing their part 3? Because I guess that then means the kind of resourcing that candidate might need would be a project that's on site, as well as like that kind of practice support. Because I am conscious that redundancy, like the economy is not great and redundancies are happening, and it's happening to part 2s as well who are in that transition. And I guess how might that even affect architectural education if projects aren't going all the way and people aren't able to do PDRs and yeah, all that kind of logistics, I guess. Yeah,
it's a great question.
Yeah, Hazel, I can give a crack at the answer, and Hazel, you can kind of come up. So I think there's sort of different parts of this, I think, to answer. One is all officers need part 2s, and all officers have the obligation to take you from through your part 3s. So it's I don't think somebody would say, well, we're getting a part 2, but we don't want them to go any further. I mean, that's the whole point of all of this, is that you're part 2 and you're going on to do your part 3. That's regardless. So unless there is a practice that you're interviewing with who says, well, actually we can't commit to your career development, then you wouldn't want to go forward with them anyway, I don't think. So that, I think there's sort of that part. Also, just in terms of the structure of the office, they will need part 2s because part 2s need to be doing a certain kind of work to facilitate their overall design and documentation. And so I don't think there would be officers that would not want Part 2s within their practice. So those jobs will still keep coming up. There was another part of your question that you asked.
Yeah.
But it was more to say, I wouldn't, certainly my previous practice wouldn't have put a stop to hiring Part 2s if there was a requirement for Part 2s, because that's a skill set that all officers need. It's difficult if they've just made redundancies, of course, but
if I could also just add to that, I think certainly having been in practice, it's not so much that you want to not hire Part 2s. It is a capacity issue. But even when you do want to retain Part 2 and support their Part 3s, often you can't put them on a project for their case study because there aren't the projects there. You might be like fully in early stage or long range projects that don't suit. But in those instances, I've found that if at least you broach the subject with the leadership team, they can access their network and you can shadow projects in other offices because they want to retain you, but they know they don't have the projects to support your Part 3, but they don't want to lose you. So I think there's those kinds of conversations that can be had. And it requires a brave front, and I think it shows how proactive you are about your own development, and it helps give the practice ideas as well that they can utilize their network. It doesn't have to all be done in-house.
Yeah, that was the other part. And that was more me thinking about shadowing other teams internally. So don't worry about your project for your forms that you need to fill out. You can shadow other people. You can dial into Teams meetings to get a little bit of experience on that. And certainly in terms of your exams and everything, that's understood that some aspects of the role might be shadowed.
Can I just jump in on the education aspect? Because Tony, you quite rightly pointed out, what does education need to do about this? And I think there's definitely a shift towards more kind of parallel tracks, so sort of saying there's an academic route, but there's a kind of parallel route that would be related to practice, and that the practice work is credit bearing, so it is actually part of your education, and that's also going to help with the astronomical costs of studying as well, and that we actually just try and integrate this much better. So things like filling out PDRs, that can be part of something that you could submit academically. So there's lots of things like that kind of coming through. I can appreciate it doesn't help all the people now that are looking for Part 1 work at the moment and just thinking, what do we do at the moment? But I would say it, the profession, it's notorious. Well, it's connected to the economy, so it's always going to be going up and down. Things change rapidly as well, and I think with those that are looking for work at the moment and are just feeling like they're not getting anywhere, I think, as Hazel said earlier, persistence is part of it. But I would also say for sort of Part 1, Part 2 students, do get other people to check the sort of folio, CV, all of that information. If you feel like you're not getting anywhere with things, then just run it past other people's eyes as well, and just check, is there anything in there that might actually mean that it's not getting to the top of a pile. And also, I think we have a really, really good student association in Dundee. I'm told it's the longest running architecture student association in the UK, but it's a great bunch of people that really support each other. And what's great is that when they're coming out of a Part 1 role, they'll be sending the message around going, worked in this practice, it was great experience, great mentoring. They're going to be putting a position out there, and they're all kind of supporting each other in terms of sort of the next person, because the practice is often saying, look, we want another Dundee student in there or wherever. So I think using those networks and building them up early as well is really key to that. I'm going to have to apologise. I need to get back to studio teaching, so I'm going to leave you all.
Thank you so much for
really
all of your
enjoyable.
wisdom today. Thank you.
Great to see you. Bye.
Thank you. So we've got a couple more questions that we'll try and get through, and then so really appreciate if anyone else can stay on the call, and or you can watch this back on replay. So Sophia, you had a question?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this workshop. It was really interesting and valuable, all your insights. I'm currently a part 1 student on my 2nd year, and I wanted to ask if you could give me a piece of advice, because I'm trying to look for a summer internship, and I was wondering how to approach practices, and like, are there any like specific features of a practices that are more likely to take on interns from part 1?
What do you mean interns, Sophia? I hope you don't mean unpaid internships.
Oh, well, no, I hope I'm going to be paid.
No. Okay, so it's sorry, it's probably my misunderstanding. As I said, as you're approaching, well, you will be your 2nd year, right? So you've got another year to go. Is that right? You've got
Yeah.
3rd year to go. So as you're approaching May, June next year, which I appreciate is when you're going to have your degree show and where you're going to be putting all your effort in just getting that work done. But this is the time to be thinking about maybe doing some speculative, I think, sending CVs to people that you want to work for. Now, practices, in my experience, our intake of part 1s ranges from different years. Sometimes it might be 3 part 1s, sometimes it might be 10 part 1s. It depends, or I think Carol mentioned, it says the economy, that they're going up and down, and what our needs for resourcing are. But as you are approaching, that towards that end of your graduation, of your degree show, this is the time that you need to be putting speculative CVs out there also. I think that will be my advice.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, maybe there are, because I heard that bigger practices, they are more likely to take on interns, because I've already started sending out my CVs, and I think I've already done about 30, but most of the practices, they not replying back, and some of them that replied, they advised me to maybe send to the bigger names, like bigger practices, because they're more likely to take on interns for summer.
Right. Sorry, I misunderstood. Is that summer that you're looking for an internship between year 2 and year 3? Well,
Yeah.
okay, that's slightly different then, rather than a completed part 1.
Yeah, I mean, Hazel, do you have some advice here? It's going to vary, isn't it? I mean, it's going to vary.
A lot of it is luck, and it's all down to persistence. So if there are certain sectors that you're keen on, whether it's aviation or commercial office workplace, it's maybe selecting 50 architects that you like. Maybe it's area, maybe you want something to be close to home, so you can select architects that are close to home. So maybe prioritize things that might be important to you. Maybe it's work stages. We are seeing a trend now where there are practices who are moving towards design concept and will finish at planning. And then those that are specializing, sort of like your Veritex, Adamson Associates, that are more technically minded. So is there an area that you want to focus on? Tania, I don't know if you remember, there was the lady who we had on Women in Architecture, and she was from overseas, and she sent out, I think it was 1,000 applications, and she got 1 offer. But because of that persistence, she managed to get that 1 offer, and it really stood out, and she's thriving and she's really happy. But it's about doing the numbers and keep going. Architecture, any industry, whether it's fashion, whether you're in the legal, whether you're a doctor, this is really tricky at this stage. So it's about continuing, keeping your head held high and going for it, and not being let down by the rejection. That perseverance is all part of this process. And again, it's not personal to you. You just keep going.
Okay. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
and I would say that in terms of from a practice perspective, getting someone in for summer, there's no serious commitment that's being made. There's no huge salaries involved. It's a great experience to get some new energy, some new blood, if you like, in to push deadlines across. And, suddenly the senior leadership team can say to their team members, look, I can bring in an extra couple of people. Would that help you over the summer? Yes. Yes, because everyone wants to go on holiday. Yes, that would help. So yeah, I would think be persistent and maybe go wider than you think in terms of who you might approach, because it's a great experience and no pressure, and you could start to build connections that might last a lot longer.
Yeah. Thank you for your responses.
So Justine, you've had your hand up for a little while. Justine, and then Vivian, and then we will close the call.
Thank you.
Hello, I put my question in the comments.
Oh, okay. Sorry, if I've got the people up, I don't have the questions up. So my question is, what is the best way to follow up to firms and also highlighting your passion and eagerness to join their team? Ooh, Natalie, do you want to take this one on?
Chasing just has to be done politely, I think, and not too repetitively. I think, give people a bit of a day, something or other. Maybe you might want to reattach if you've sent something with it before, so they don't have to go digging for the previous correspondence. It's like, I messaged you a few days ago. It'd be really lovely to hear your thoughts. I would do it that way, but that's my approach. The second part of the question, Tania?
It's just that eagerness to join your specific firm, and I think the way we spoke about this on the prep call was like showing that you know that about that practice, so it doesn't feel like a generic approach. I think goes a long way, right?
It's good if you have gone through the website of the practice. Certainly, when I was interviewing, or I had people in for interviews, I was interviewing people. If they said, I really like this project because of this reason, you did this project with this client, I've worked with that client before, I've done this, that, and the other. So just bringing something that brings the practice that you're applying for and your previous work or your passion together makes it a lot easier to understand or to see a synergy between the candidate and the practice and go, okay, well, they noticed that detail, or they noticed the way that we planned the space, or whatever it was. I think that's really good to make sure that you've been seen to do your work on it. You've read their ethos, you've read their mission statement. You can drop in a few keywords. I think that's quite helpful too.
Thank you.
So Vivian. Hi. Oops, you're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to start by saying kia ora to Natalie as a fellow Kiwi. I was really happy to hear that you talk a lot about looking at skills, not as experience, because all my experiences in New Zealand, I've moved here recently. So I was just wondering if you had any advice on sort of any courses or things I should be doing to show, I guess, more of like an eagerness to connect to the UK industry, because I have experience with, yes, New Zealand regulations and New Zealand systems. Is there a way to sort of talk about it, or, yeah, I guess do things to show connection and dedication to the UK? Yeah, thank you.
It's a brilliant question.
I'll start first. Kia ora. I would say, well, I mean, I learned on the job. So I was registered in New Zealand before I came over. I just started running things as a project architect. That wasn't an issue. You will quite quickly change your ears around things. So rather than resource consent, you're going for planning consent. There's not a building consent issue that happens at the same stage. There's building control that gets sign off. There's little bits like that. And I mean, it's probably just worth reading, you've got your RIBA stages that sort of has what it is. And it's those little bits of lingo that you'll probably find trips you up, but just ask questions, and that will, you ask the question once and that's done. There's funny things that you'll find, like knowing NZS 3604 back to back, people are only just getting to grips with building and timber over here. And you're like, how on earth did you not know that you couldn't notch out a beam at that point? There's funny things like that. So you will have advantage in some situations. So so be confident with that you have another area of expertise. Are there other bits, Hazel, that you want to add into, perhaps with international crossover, or?
Possibly, yeah. We found that particularly with New Zealand and Australia is software skills. Sometimes you're actually leagues ahead. And how the Australian architects are trained is you have more response, not talking Australians, there's a lot more responsibility put on them at a younger age. So sometimes in terms of their skill levels, you're actually more advanced than UK counterparts because of just how it works in the US. And I think I've seen that in New Zealand as well. But we've often seen people really fly quite quickly because your soft skills are so much more advanced in New Zealand, or you've done more with your software, again, compared to UK counterparts. So it might be getting in on somewhere on that. But what softwares do you use, may I ask?
Yeah, my work experience has been in Revit. In university, we used Rhino and Grasshopper, as well as sort of varying rendering systems. It depended on the course.
Which are all key softwares at the moment. So we don't necessarily see huge issues. It's just, again, it's pinpointing your skills, your value, and matchmaking that with a client that needs what you do.
The other thing I found surprising when I moved over is that there's not a draftsman culture. So there's not the architectural technicians that are specialists in their fields. A lot of practices, the architect does everything. So that was one thing that I was quite surprised about. I was like, okay, so I need this. Who do I give this to? Who's the guy that's doing the? But no, you just take on the number 8 fencing wire approach and you adapt.
But I guess I would just add that because CPDs are, a thing that, adds to your credibility if you choose to pursue that, you could seek out courses and then be talking to your future employer about, well, I'm taking on this. And so you're taking all this initiative to learn the UK ways, if you like, and you're really thriving because of all your skills that you bring from New Zealand. So yeah, I think showing the initiative that you really want to understand how things are done here, but equally that you're able to challenge because you're looking at it with fresh eyes. I think it's a brilliant combination. So yes. Well, that might be the end of our call. Thank you so much to all of our guest speakers and those that had to drop away. We knew that this shouldn't have just been done in an hour, but there you go. We wanted to at least have this set up so that most people could join us. So thank you so much for all of your questions, and we look forward to watching the recording if you're watching this back on replay. Thank you so much to all of our guest speakers. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Tania. Bye, everyone.
Bye.